Our next panel is the Anti-Fraud Masterclass. What tools are available for us to use? And for this one, I'd like to thank our sponsors, NetNumber, but in no particular order. Catalin, if I can have you on the stage. Eric, or as I like to say, Canada's son. David, and Nate Kliger.
Bright lights, big city.
All right, exactly. It's going to be exciting. Now, while people are trickling in, who would like to go first with this question? One thing that's about yourself that's not on your LinkedIn profile. I'm looking at you, Eric. Something tells me you live a very storied life.
Oh, what's not on my LinkedIn profile? I'm ambidextrous.
That's a sign of intelligence. Impressive.
Well, most of my I is very A.
I was going to say that my uniqueness, not on my resume, is the fact that we actually work together. Yeah, I mean, Mobile 365-ish.
It was good days.
Yeah. Besides that, though, something unique about myself. I was a kid. I lived in England as a kid. I had a great accent. Moved back here and I lost it. So when you hear Simeon Coney later and how fabulous his accent is, and he doesn't matter what he says, that could have been me. But,
Oh, okay. You could have been Simeon's competition.
I could have had the good voice, but I don't.
How about you, Nate?
Well, it's been a long time since I've updated my LinkedIn profile. It's a good reminder. I should probably do that. Yeah. But I think one thing for me is I live in Colorado. I moved out to Colorado at the start of COVID. Huge skier, but I've never skied in Canada, so I think I need to add that to my list.
I think Canada has more than ample opportunity.
I figured.
Catalin?
I like to travel, so this is why it's great to be part of MEF, combine the business with pleasure.
In many ways, we're like traveling buddies. We see each other at the same locations.
Yes.
It works out pretty well. Now, who wants to go first on this question? The Anti-Fraud Masterclass. Tell me what the curriculum of a traditional masterclass, if you were building an anti-fraud curriculum, if you will, for messaging, what would it look like?
Give it a try. So I think there are two things here. First of all, what are the types of fraud that we're looking at, and I think everyone in the room is familiar here. But there are things that might be simply annoying, scam calls and things like that. But it gets quite quickly to a point where it's damaging to the consumers on one hand. So from smishing to there are stories every day about accounts that get wiped out because one-time passwords get intercepted or users are socially engineered. But then also to carriers and service providers, things like artificially inflated traffic, it was mentioned today on a panel, or CLI refining in the context of origin-based rating. So I think that the list is enormous. There are tens, if not hundreds of possible ways. Fraudsters are very creative, but then on the other hand, what is the industry doing to address and mitigate those things? And I think we're here today to speak about those. What are the tools that make the ecosystem safer and more secure?
I would add to that, how can we improve as a group the ecosystem, right? What are we doing to enhance everybody's position in this while protecting the end users and making the ecosystem more friendly for everybody?
And what would be kind of some of the concepts? We talked about AIT. What are some of the new threats you're seeing that to the pristine nature of messaging that we should be talking about? I know AITs, and especially we have two experts talking about it later in the afternoon, but something else that we should be discussing?
Well, that's probably one of the biggest topics that I'm hearing right now. Other one is, of course, things like compliancy or native around that. My take on a lot of this is that we need to strategize as a team, right? I mean, what is it that we can do to improve the ecosystem? What can we do to help people to advance their topics in this space?
I think that for me, the important thing is to think about the why, right? It's not just about like fraud itself and the issues that it caused. I think it's what is the impact that it has on the ecosystem overall. And I think one of the things that I'll continue to bring to the room is the impact on brands. The reason that SMS became a valuable channel for brands is because it was relatively clean and there's a lot of good interaction that you can get there. We actually sold, like, our sales pitch 5 years ago was email's dead, there's too much spam. And why did that happen? Well, it's because the channel was allowed to grow to a place where it didn't have the right level of controls. And so the impact that that has is that it, for the end consumer, right, it means that they don't trust it anymore. And if you eliminate that trust, it doesn't work anymore. And so I think the why of why we're doing this, especially for the people that are using the channel, is important beyond just the rote case of fraud.
So I think that one of the best ways to counter misinformation is to focus on good information. And that's the area that NetNumber specializes in, the collection of and dissemination of good information, good data. Taking advantage of all the data that's out there and really assessing the content that you're receiving through that data lens will make the system significantly better, and that's the masterclass.
In terms of that conversation, how would you overlay the network? And you know, we're going to use Nate as our proxy for all the brands that are using it. No pressure there, Nate.
I'm here for it.
The question is, how do we explain what it is that NetNumber and NetNumber-like services provide in terms of fraud mitigation into the network?
So I'll start, and then I'll get Catalin to jump in as well. The data NetNumber receives from various sources, and that data is the basic information that you're going to have around a phone number. It's phone number information. It's historical phone number information as well. Are there changes to that particular number? What is the risk profile of a number that has moved over the last 60, 90 days? What is the difference in the risk profile if it moved from one operator to another or from one operator to an OTT player? And making assessments, especially if you're if you're running OTP or if you're running any kind of marketing that will impact financially a company or a group of individuals, you take as much data as possible, assess it, and then make a decision as to how to work with that phone number given the data that you've analyzed.
And I would add to that, transparency is critical, and having the right, tools and platforms to deliver the transparency to the ecosystem. And in addition to, the phone number intelligence that Eric explained, we talked about NDLC in the US today, and there, all the A2P brand campaign, 10DLC sender ID information is in the NetNumber services registry, and on behalf of the industry, we run this registry and then we distribute the data to the entire industry. So if we take the situation where, one of the spam filters identifies a specific message that is scam or spam, so you can really easily then go look at this data, identify all the senders that are used for that particular campaign, or maybe all the campaigns that are associated with a specific brand, and in seconds, essentially, you can identify the full scope of misbehavior and then stop it rather than just applying patches individually.
Dave, in your role in Adaptive, how are you looking at the whole global threat intelligence matrix, if you will?
That's really kind of a critical part of our business, right? We see about a quarter of the world's traffic through our deployments globally. That data that Eric keeps referring to, that's critical for us to analyze. We take that data, we use it for the advantage of each and every customer that has our software in place has that pooled data from around the globe. So we have the threats that may be in one part of the world. We can take that and replicate what it would be looking like in the US or some other part of the region. So data is critical for us to manipulate.
And that brings me my question for you, Nate. As someone who tries to, on a daily basis, simplify this complexity for the brands, what is the one or two things that you think this masterclass should have that, okay, this is where you should know that how that number functions, but if you want to change the way you are represented, this is the path. There's a way to say, I know how the world works.
Yep.
If I want to know how to change it, this is the pathway to go through.
So I think from a brand perspective, I think what we need to tap into is what are the reasons that they care. So I think ultimately when we get into the really granular information of how SMS works and what are the security issues that are there, we have to play into their fears a little bit. I think when you look at the brand perspective, there's probably like at least 3 dimensions of fear. Number one is what's out there from a risk perspective of like an account takeover or something that is causing me to have my brand reputation as the source of this. Like, what are you as the provider doing to protect me? So that's one area of fear. I think one additional potentially interesting area actually is a little bit out of the fraud and spam case, but more so in the like legal and compliance case for the brands and understanding what is the risk profile of phone numbers in my system? What happens if someone gets in there without consent for whatever reason, or the number gets reassigned, that kind of ancillary information that protects them. I think the third piece of that is how do they protect themselves against those 2 things without being too aggressive to the point where they're not sending to all the people that they could be or engaging with the largest audience. And I think if you can wrap all of that in a way that makes them feel comfortable, basically combating against their fears, I think that's what they're looking for. And at the end of the day, they shouldn't have to know about any of that stuff. They hear about it from the industry. And so what can we do as the industry to mitigate it, limit it, and put the right tools in place to build their confidence?
That's actually pretty well said. I can see why everybody wants you on their panel. But you know, clicking down on that simplicity, my question then is, like, what are some of the challenges you're seeing around, and this is for the entire panel, around brand awareness? Like, how much of this is education? Like, you know, every brand, everybody in this room actually probably has a webinar that's designed for the brand saying this is how messaging works. And if you ask the marketers, the attendance rates are abysmally low for most of them because there's enough going on in our lives. I don't want to learn how messaging works. It should work the way it works on my phone. I send a text message, I get a response, unless it's Eric who's ghosting me. But having said that, what could we be doing better for simplifying all of this narrative, this complexity?
I can start with that. There's an education component to it, and that is becoming more and more important as cases of fraud increase or attempts at fraud increase. And there's also an investment component. I mean, this costs something. Every time that you're diving a little bit deeper and getting more data around the numbers that you are working with, there's another database that you have to access. There's information that you need to get and analyze. And that takes time and that takes money. And it's just important to keep in mind that at the end, the user experience, the end user experience, will improve if there is greater accuracy and less fraud and greater analysis going in. The key is ensuring the investment is made to get there. It's very easy to just send a number and see what happens, but a 1%, 2%, 3% difference in a fraud reduction situation or improvement on a particular program that's being run, whether it's marketing or OTP or anything else, will lead to huge results for the end users, the enterprises using the medium, and it improves the ecosystem as a whole, ultimately leading to greater trust in the ecosystem. So education and investment going hand in hand.
And how much of that should be the role of the attentives, or should we be doing as an industry something better? Should netnumber have webinars for?
We're doing our part. We're doing our part, but everyone has a role to play. And I think when they start seeing the results, they'll be more enticed to do more education to their customer base.
Like in our world, right? We end up spending a lot of time. So we have a threat intelligence team that works with our CPaaS providers or carrier partners. A lot of times, there's always a false positive part of this messaging scenario. A lot of it is not about, maybe it's not about the bad actors, or maybe it's just about people not knowing how to configure messages appropriately. So a lot of our time is spent, especially in CPaaS world, where we go out and talk to the end users with the cooperation of the CPaaS provider to explain to their brands how to configure messages more appropriately so that you will not get them blocked. A lot of it's just sometimes it's how they're configured, how they're set up. It's how do people not realize they're doing this, but it's so simple that it maybe just needs a tweak.
Is there an example that comes to your mind?
Yeah, I have an infamous story I always tell about. We had a customer that was a dog walking service, and they would frequently send out, they go to your house, they let your dog out, they take a picture of your dog on the walk. Well, what it really looked like in real life was porn, because they'd send a link to a photo and say, most of the time it was Fifi. Hey, here's a picture of Fifi. I'm taking her out, right? So, that's a good example of how not to set something up, and it actually caused quite a bit of problems, but we're all laughed our way through that one. Because, yeah.
Maybe to take another example, less exciting than the one provided by Dave, I think, but kind of to illustrate the point of how education plays together with the right tools. So, AIT, topic of the day, it's one of those problems that can't be solved by one entity alone. And at the origin of the problem, you have different processes on the enterprise side that are, weakly designed. If it's a CAPTCHA that is missing, or if it's a sign-up process for an OTT app that is too easy to overcome, it's easy to come into the kind of conclusion. Is the enterprise side, is the brand's problem? They didn't secure the process in the right way, so they should pay for the traffic. But I think while it's fair to say we have to educate them as to how to enhance those processes, also downstream on the entire value chain, there are tools out there that are available to mitigate this problem. It's probably not fully solvable by today's standards, but it's usually happening with destination numbers that belong to high-cost destinations. So those are quite easy to be identified. And if you see a spike in a destination that is 25 cents per message, and you had no messages before, these are things that can be identified pretty much in real time today, and you can help those brands avoid this cost and avoid this type of fraud. So I think it's always a mix of between education and tools, and these two together are pretty powerful.
And in terms of education and tool, I'm going to pick on you a little bit more, Eric.
It's easy to do.
It's easy to do. You had a storied career, like in messaging. You've seen it come through your career at SAP before, when SAP was called SAP. What are some of the changes that are coming in from a technology perspective in this room, but also the new ways that the brands, our customers, are pushing the A2B channel that are both give you a sense of promise and also kind of like, oh, we don't have that fully fleshed out yet?
So brands are looking for greater engagement. And this is where companies like Attentive play a very significant role. So once again, I'm not going to just toss it over to Nate, but this is, but that's a big part of it. That communication, that the language of communication for brands that they're used to getting from their marketing companies is really important. If one group is not going to be able to do it, another one will pop in, and they're going to fill that void, as several have done. Then there are the vested interest aspects. So AIT is a great example, the artificially inflated traffic. There are beneficiaries from artificially inflated traffic. And those beneficiaries will work very hard, and sometimes they're within the ecosystem. They will work very hard to keep that traffic artificially inflated as there are dollars attached to that artificially inflated traffic. Getting everybody on the same page and seeing a situation more completely will continue to improve everyone's well-being. So that has evolved. I remember several years ago seeing wild traffic coming out of countries that have more sheep than people. And there were problems. But then there were people saying, wait, no, this could be legitimate. Let's do something about this. Everyone getting on board and stopping that is better for the ecosystem as a whole. Short-term gains, put them aside. It's all about the long-term gain.
And so that's a consistent theme you're saying, is that every time you compromise the long-term vision, someone's getting burnt.
Absolutely. You have to keep your eyes on the prize. It's that long-term vision that has to play into this. And this is why increase in data analysis of the numbers, everyone's uniform attempt to block bad actors out of situations, various companies and industries working together, the CPaaS, the ASPs, the net numbers of the world. Everyone can make this better, and that's what we should be doing.
And in terms of threat, seeing what's coming down the road, to put it nicely, outside of the AIT stuff, I'm looking at you, Dave, like, what are some of the threats you're seeing coming towards the entire North American sure that I think we should be more concerned about?
I think a lot of the stuff we see that I think does the most harm to reputations as well as individuals is the constant phishing scams, right? Bank phishing, all that. I wouldn't say it's new and it's not coming, but they always are getting better at faking it. They're always getting better at manipulating the end user. I've fallen for it, actually, embarrassingly enough before. And the aspect I think that's important about that is it has a real cost damage. And a lot of the carriers today and companies are very concerned about their Twitter reputation, social media reputation. That's the fastest thing to get a bad reputation is people on Reddit or whatever reporting this like, hey, I just got scammed, through this channel. So that to me, I think the threats around, not necessarily new threats, but threats that get better and better at deceiving.
And so you chanced upon a very good word, reputation. And the phone number for us, at least, is a proxy for reputation, right? I have my same phone number through AT&T since 1999, and without outside of Eric, everyone still answers my call. I'm only picking on you because you have the same shirt as I do. But having said that, are you seeing OTTs tap into the reputational aspect of phone numbers? So this always kind of gets me the wrong way, which is I'm like, WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, they used a user ID which they did not create, that they don't manage, and they've created a better platform than SMS is. Maybe I shouldn't get mad about it, but it kind of like, really, you don't own this. You don't have to do any of the work, and you're using this reputation, shared reputation, to get and create a parallel network of your own. So are you seeing more adoption? Are you seeing people from Meta calling and saying, we would love to share data and figure out how to make this shared network and the phone number more pristine?
We're constantly looking for new sources of shared data, but I'm not the guy that gets those relationships, but I think we're trying to design a platform where we do share more data. TCR is a good example of that. We're constantly trying to find new sources to make the data cleaner and more trustable. So it's something we're constantly working on.
And those feedback loops, are those something that what's coming down the pipe that excites you in terms of the quicker feedback loops? We've heard the term campaign drift a lot, and we're going to talk about it in more detail in a following panel, but are those feedback loops getting better, would you say?
I think, obviously there's the old-fashioned kind of 7726, 7727. That's a good way to get feedback. It's not always clean, right? Sometimes people use it to complain about their boyfriend or the taxes and stuff in their inbox. I think that feedback is critical. We have a reputation score we assign to spammers. I treat it I explain it like it's like your credit score, right? It's like you do bad things, it goes up. You do good things, it goes down. And so that loop of understanding reputation, adding other data forms to make it successful. I think the most successful companies I see, from a competitive landscape, they might have our product, might have the competitors, but they take all forms of data to improve what they're looking at, just sort of like these guys do. So. That was a segue for you.
Catalin.
Yeah, no, fully agree. I think it's all about, there is plenty of data out there, but, combination of data, correlation of data, better integration of data to, support use cases like this. I think this is key.
And then my question before we open up for the audience questions is, and I'll look to Eric again, but anybody can summarize for me, which is what excites you about the awareness and the knowledge that we're building about fraud and anti-fraud mitigation.
I'd be happier if people weren't talking about it because that would mean that it wasn't there. But because it's there and the attempts are being made to hurt people in some way, sometimes in more egregious ways than others, means that everyone has to address it. I'd like to see, just to veer off a little bit, more of an end user focused approach to mitigation as well. Right now, there's very little an end user can do to find out if whatever they're receiving is fraudulent or not. The assumption for many people is that it is. If you are getting something on your mobile device and it doesn't have a name of a friend or mom attached to it, you doubt it. There's really no way of verifying whether or not it has or has not been registered and what it may be. If there was any kind of end user available database to verify that, when we have the information there, that would help that situation along. Because what we're talking about, these fishing expeditions and other dangerous situations really exist because people don't know what they're getting.
I don't know if it's my bank that's telling me they need my password or someone else. You're right.
The banks that are using short codes are a very safe piece of the ecosystem now for quite some time. But we had a number of conversations around 10DLC, and as it evolves in the US and expands into Canada, how do we add additional value to those products? And that's where I think some end user data, available data, would be very helpful.
Absolutely. On that note, I would like to open up for questions. There's a mic that's going on.
Hey guys, James Morgan, Twilio. My question for you is around, is there a business model that you think would work for this that passes these costs efficiently through the industry? Right now, I think most of the data costs, most of the operating costs are paid for just as a cost of doing business, kind of in the DCA and aggregator layers. But if the problem is at higher level brand or end user layers, whom is prepared to pay for this, and how might that business model present itself?
Yeah, well, I can try to answer to that. So yeah, great question. I think it also depends on the type of fraud that you're looking at. But a simple example here would be financial fraud. If you're considering the cost that is potentially below $0.01 to access some of these data points, and then a $20,000, $50,000, euro, whatever loss from someone else's account, I think the business case is already there. And we've seen from this perspective, we've seen great success of some of the operator APIs like SIM swap detection and all of the others, because they truly help at reducing these types of fraud, and then the cost to access those data points are minimal. So yeah.
Hi, Surinder Anand from .co. I had an observation and a question related to that. RCS, beyond offering rich messaging capability, is also a far more secure channel with its verification process, the brand's sender ID, the logo, the verified trust mark. So what do you see is the potential of RCS as a way to mitigate some of the fraud by sending not just rich messages, but the basic RCS or SMS text messages, sending them through an RCS sender ID? That basically, you're automatically getting the brand's name, trust mark, and the logo. So is it something that has been, what would be your view on that as a potential?
Yeah, I think that's great from that perspective. You're fully right that in terms of the sender verification is part of the process, but that's not the only type of fraud in terms of messaging. If you look at, I'm not sure if there is an AIT type of fraud in RCS yet, but you can still imagine that it's potentially or could be potentially a problem. And then verifying the B numbers, the destination numbers, is something that should be part of the process as well.
Any other questions? Going once, going twice, and we just rendered right on time. Thank you, panel. Please give them a...